Welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Aurum, I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please check below to see if you've subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and just allows our stories to pop up on your feed more often. The stone wept copper tears. At least that's what Liam's mind supplied as his brush carefully cleared away centuries of mineral deposits, revealing delicate streaks of metallic orange that traced down what was unmistakably a face. His hands trembled slightly as he worked, and not from the usual excitement of discovery. There was something different about this find, something that made his chest tight and his breath catch every time he unveiled another detail. He had initially mistaken her for a masterwork statue, and who could blame him? The anatomical perfection seemed impossible for the primitive civilization whose ruins he'd been excavating. Her features possessed a kind of beauty that transcended any human standard of aesthetics, yet somehow struck a chord deep within him that resonated with something primal and true. "Who were you?" he whispered, his words echoing in the chamber's silence. The beam of his headlamp caught the curves of her face, highlighting cheekbones that seemed to capture and hold the light like burnished metal. Her lips were parted slightly, frozen in what might have been a gasp or a cry, and Liam found himself absently touching his own lips in response. He forced himself to maintain scientific detachment as he documented each new detail, but his notes grew increasingly personal with each passing hour. Subject exhibits non-human characteristics, including elongated ears and unusual skin patterns. Her ears sweep back gracefully, like the wings of some exotic bird, and the markings on her skin flow like rivers of molten gold. The most striking feature was her hair. As he cleared away the accumulation of ages, it revealed itself as a cascade of orange strands that caught and scattered light like frozen flames. The color gradation was mesmerizing, deep crimson at the roots fading to brilliant amber at the tips, with every shade of fire in between. Even trapped in stone, it seemed to move, as if each strand had been caught in mid-dance by whatever force had imprisoned her. "This can't be right," he muttered, checking his instruments for the third time. Every piece of equipment he brought near the figure exhibited strange behavior. His electromagnetic field detector went haywire, its readings oscillating wildly. The thermal imaging camera showed impossible heat signatures emanating from within the stone itself. Even his simple digital camera struggled to focus on her face, as if reality itself wavered in her presence. As the day progressed, Liam found himself talking to her more and more. He'd always had the habit of speaking to his discoveries. It helped him think, he'd told colleagues who questioned it. But this was different. He told her about his theories, his hopes, his lonely choice to pursue solitary research in these ruins. Sometimes he could have sworn he felt something brush against his thoughts in response, like a warm breeze carrying whispered words just below the threshold of hearing. The chamber itself seemed to emanate energy as he worked. Ancient murals surrounded them, depicting scenes he was only beginning to understand. They showed beings of light and fire, figures that bore a striking resemblance to the one before him. Some of the scenes appeared to be warnings, though of what he couldn't quite grasp. The altar she was partially embedded in bore symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles, defying his attempts at documentation. As sunset approached, Liam's headlamp caught something that made him catch his breath. Beneath the last layer of debris, her skin appeared to shimmer with an inner light, like heat waves rising from a sun-baked stone. The effect was subtle but unmistakable, a rippling, living quality that no statue could possess. His hand moved of its own accord, reaching out to touch her cheek before he could stop himself. "You're not a statue, are you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with sudden understanding. The temperature in the chamber seemed to rise several degrees, and for a moment he could have sworn he saw her skin burn with amber light. His scientific mind raced to explain away what he was seeing, but the truth was becoming impossible to deny. This was no masterwork of ancient artisans. This was something else entirely. The scorch marks around her prison took on new significance as he examined them more closely. They radiated outward from her form like the blast pattern from an explosion, but inverted, as if something had been contained rather than released. His fingers traced the patterns absently as his mind tried to process the implications. As darkness fell outside the ruins, Liam knew he should pack up for the day, return to his camp, write his field notes, and contact his colleagues about the discovery. That would be the professional thing to do. Instead, he found himself setting up additional lights around the chamber, unable to tear himself away. The play of artificial light across her features created new mysteries with every shift of illumination. Sometimes her expression seemed peaceful, almost serene. Other times he caught hints of struggle or defiance in the set of her jaw and the tension in her neck. Just a few more minutes, he told himself, knowing it was a lie. He had passed the point of scientific objectivity hours ago, and some part of him knew it. This wasn't just another artifact to be cataloged and analyzed. With each layer of stone he cleared away, each new detail he uncovered, he felt himself being drawn deeper into whatever mystery had been waiting here for millennia to be discovered. The night grew deeper around him as he worked, but Liam barely noticed. His world had narrowed to the smooth sweep of his brush across stone, the gradual revelation of new wonders, and the growing certainty that he stood on the brink of something that would change everything. The warm breeze of almost thoughts grew stronger with each passing hour, and sometimes, when his concentration wavered, he could have sworn he saw her chest rise and fall with phantom breath. What had they done to you? He wondered, studying the ancient marks of restraint and containment. What were they so afraid of that they would turn something so beautiful into stone? The questions tumbled through his mind as he worked, each new detail adding to the mystery rather than solving it. And through it all, her face remained serene in its suffering, a sort of testament to whatever power had been bound here in stone and time. His hand trembled as he reached out one final time, drawn by an impulse he couldn't explain. The stone beneath his fingers felt warm, almost feverish, and in that moment of contact, the ambient temperature in the chamber skyrocketed. Twin points of light blazed to life in her eyes, like stars being born, and Liam felt the ground shift beneath his feet as hairline cracks began spreading across her stone prison, each one glowing with inner fire. He tried to step back, but found himself frozen in place, caught in her awakening gaze as the world around them began to change forever. Time stretched like molten glass as the stone prison shattered, releasing waves of heat that distorted the air around them. Liam's hand remained frozen against her cheek, his mind struggling to process the impossible transformation happening before him. Her copper skin almost vibrated with inner light, and he watched in wonder as her first breath in millennia made her chest rise and fall. Their eyes met, and Liam felt something brush against his consciousness, gentle yet alien, like warm silk against his thoughts. Her flame-colored hair moved in an unfelt breeze, the deep crimson roots brightening to brilliant amber tips that seemed to dance with real fire. The air between them glowed with thermal distortion, making her appear almost ethereal as she studied him with equal fascination. "Human?" Her voice was like warm honey, flowing directly into his mind even as it reached his ears. "You are the being from whom I stole this language and the mental energy to free myself?" Her head tilted slightly, sending cascades of living flame rippling around her face. "How are you still standing after being drained of so much power?" Before Liam could formulate a response, a deep rumble echoed through the chamber. Hairline cracks spread along the ancient walls like lightning through storm clouds. The alien woman attempted to step forward but stumbled, her muscles weak from God knows how long without use. Without hesitation, Liam caught her, surprised by the warmth radiating from her skin. "We need to move," he said, supporting her weight against his side. "The whole chamber's coming down." The ruins seemed to be folding inward, as if the very stone was trying to collapse in on itself to fill the void she had left in the altar. They made their way through increasingly narrow passages, her body trembling with effort against his. The heat emanating from her skin made the air around them grow bright in a yellow hue, turning the collapsing corridor into a fever dream of moving shadows and falling stone. Every few steps, her legs would threaten to give out, and Liam would have to half carry her over debris that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Left," he commanded, as a section of ceiling crashed down behind them. His archaeological knowledge of the ruins layout suddenly vital to their survival. "This passage connects to the outer complex." He felt her nod against his shoulder, her flame-like hair brushing his neck with tender warmth. Their progress was painfully slow, each step a battle against her weakened muscles and the rapidly deteriorating structure around them. Fragments of her memories flickered through his mind, glimpses of stars he'd never seen, worlds he couldn't name, and a desperate final moment before the stone took her. The mental connection between them grew stronger with each shared moment of danger, each narrow escape from falling debris. The passage narrowed dramatically, forcing them to press close together as they sidled through. Her skin burned like a fever against his, and he could feel her rapid heartbeat, so similar to that of a human, yet subtly different in its rhythm. A massive grinding sound from above spurred them to move faster, propriety forgotten in the face of survival. "Almost there!" Liam gasped as they rounded the final bend. Ahead, he could see the relative stability of the outer ruins, their weathered stones unmoved by whatever force was consuming the inner chamber. With a final surge of effort, they stumbled out into the open air, collapsing together against a fallen column as the passage behind them gave way with a thunderous roar. They lay there, catching their breath, her head resting against his shoulder as the dust settled around them. The heat of her body gradually subsided from near burning to a pleasant warmth, like sitting beside a campfire on a cool night. Above them, alien stars wheeled in familiar patterns, unchanged by the momentous events they had just witnessed. "You saved me," she murmured, her mental voice carrying notes of wonder and exhaustion in equal measure. "After all this time, all their precautions, all their fear, it was a simple human who set me free." Her flame-colored hair settled around them both like a living blanket, its tips still flickering with inner light. Liam looked down at her, still struggling to process everything that had happened. The beautiful statue he had been studying hours ago now breathed and moved in his arms, her copper skin glowing with life, her presence in his mind as real as the ruins around them. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, he realized with startling clarity that his life would never be the same. The outer ruins provided shelter as the last echoes of collapse faded into the night. Her breathing had steadied, though her skin still radiated waves of heat that made the air move around them. When she finally lifted her head from his shoulder, her copper-toned face caught the starlight in ways that made his breath catch. The moment stretched between them, full of unasked questions and unspoken answers, until she broke the silence with a gentle smile that sent ribbons of golden light rippling across her skin. "I am Izara," she said, her mental presence wrapping around his thoughts like a warm blanket. The flame-like patterns beneath her copper skin brightened with each word, casting subtle shadows across the weathered stone around them. "And you are Liam, the one whose thoughts flow so freely." "I should be terrified," he admitted, watching the play of starlight across her features. "A being who can read minds, who draws firepower from mental energy." He paused, studying the way her flame-colored hair floated in currents of heated air. "Yet Somehow I'm not afraid at all." Her lips curved into a smile that sent waves of warmth through the space between them. "Your lack of mental barriers is refreshing. Most beings guard their thoughts jealously." The markings on her skin, like rivers of liquid gold, caught the starlight as she shifted position. "Though I must admit, your mind's energy tastes sweeter than any I've encountered before." "How long were you trapped?" Liam asked, his archaeologist's curiosity warring with his growing personal interest. The temperature around them rose slightly as her expression darkened with memory. "I crashed here. The exact time eludes me now." Her hair moved restlessly, deep crimson roots bleeding into brilliant amber tips. "The natives feared what they couldn't understand about my abilities." A small laugh escaped her, golden light racing across her skin. "Oh, it seems they received what you humans call karma, considering the state of their civilization now." Liam nodded, gesturing at the ruins surrounding them. "They're long gone. Their entire culture, their beliefs, their fears, all dust now." He hesitated, then added, "Everything except you." "You're not saying everything you're thinking," she observed, her eyes glowing like banked coals. "I can feel the questions burning in your mind." "You already know all this from my memories, don't you?" he asked, watching the way her hair cast ever-changing patterns of light and shadow across her face. Her skin radiated a gentle warmth as she smiled. "Yes, but I enjoy hearing you tell it, the way you shape thoughts into words." She reached out, her fingers hovering just above his temple. "It's like watching an artist work." "I've never been good at talking about myself," Liam admitted. "It's actually comforting that you can just see who I am inside." He gestured vaguely at his head. "No need for awkward explanations or misunderstandings." Surprise flickered across her features, sending ripples of light racing beneath her copper skin. The temperature around them spiked briefly before settling into a pleasant warmth. "How unique! You're truly unlike any being I've encountered in my travels," she said, her mental voice carrying notes of wonder and something deeper, more intimate. A practical concern suddenly struck him as he noticed her slight trembling. "You must be exhausted and hungry. It's been, what, thousands of years since your last meal?" He stood, offering his hand. "My ship's just half a mile from here. I can help you walk." She accepted his support, her skin radiating heat where they touched. "I'll need that help," she admitted, leaning into his strength. "My muscles remember their purpose, but they're weak from disuse." Her hair brushed against his arm, each strand carrying the warmth of a gentle flame without burning. They made their way slowly through the ruins, each step bringing new discoveries about each other. She marveled at the strength of his physical form, even as he found himself captivated by the way light seemed to live within her skin. Their conversation flowed between spoken words and mental impressions, creating a pattern that lasted throughout the short trip. "Lucky you're omnivorous," she joked as they navigated around a fallen column. "Or things would get awkward when I asked for roast meat after a few millennia." The golden patterns beneath her skin brightened with her amusement. "I have enough supplies for two," he assured her, supporting her over a particularly challenging stretch of debris. "Though I admit I never expected to share them with someone like you." Her laughter sent waves of warmth through the cool night air. "Someone like me?" The flame-like strands of her hair danced with apparent amusement. "A strange alien who invaded your mind and stole your energy?" "A being of living fire who was trapped in stone," he corrected, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Someone who makes the universe feel bigger and more wonderful just by existing." She stopped walking, her eyes glowing like twin stars as she turned to face him. The heat emanating from her skin intensified, making the air around them waver. "Careful, Liam," she warned, though her mental voice carried no real caution.
Speaking such beautiful thoughts to a telepath can be dangerous.
He met her gaze steadily, accepting the warmth of her presence in his mind.
I'm starting to think that some dangers are worth risking.
The week that followed passed in a comfortable rhythm of shared meals and endless conversations. Liam's small ship, barely meant for one person, somehow felt more like home with Izara in it. Her presence had transformed the strictly utilitarian space. Now the air carried constant currents of warmth, and her flame-colored hair cast ever-changing patterns of light across the metal walls. As they sat down for their evening meal, the golden traces beneath her copper skin painted intricate designs in the dimmed lighting, and Liam found himself wondering how he'd ever lived in such cold solitude before. Liam watched Izara move through his cramped ship's kitchen, her borrowed clothes, his spare expedition gear, hanging loose on her frame, yet somehow making her seem more ethereal. A week of proper nutrition and exercise had restored some of her natural grace, the initial weakness from millennia of imprisonment now replaced by fluid movement that made the air ripple with waves of heat. His small ship, designed for solitary research, felt transformed by her presence, warmer, alive with the constant dance of light from her flame-colored hair against the metal walls.
Do you even enjoy talking to me?
The question escaped before he could stop it, breaking their comfortable dinner routine.
You could just look inside my mind whenever you want.
He immediately regretted the words, hearing his own insecurity laid bare. Her copper skin darkened as she set down her fork, golden patterns flowing like molten metal beneath her surface.
I only catch fragments without actively extracting memories,
she said, her voice carrying a warmth that made his skin tingle.
Surface thoughts, emotions, but your voice?
Her eyes brightened like twin flames.
It carries colors I've never experienced before.
Liam found himself leaning forward, drawn by the intensity of her gaze.
Tell me about your people,
he said, trying to redirect his thoughts from dangerous territory.
In all our conversations this week, you've barely mentioned them.
The temperature spiked as something fierce and passionate flashed across her features.
We're nomads, or at least we were,
she began, her hair floating in currents of heated air.
Our homeworld was lost so long ago that even its name has become legend. We scattered among the stars, creating meeting points, secret places where we could gather, share knowledge, exchange resources.
Her voice carried equal amounts of pride and loss, the golden traces beneath her skin drawing complex patterns of memory and emotion.
But now?
Liam asked softly, watching pain flicker across her face.
Now, my knowledge is ancient. Those meeting points might not even exist anymore.
The temperature dropped with her sadness, and Liam felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her, followed immediately by guilty self-reproach. She didn't need his comfort. She was an ancient being of incredible power, not some lost soul seeking shelter. This past week had been nothing more than recovery time for her, he told himself firmly. The meals they'd shared, the long conversations, the way her laughter made the air dance with heat, none of it meant what his treacherous heart wanted it to mean. He watched the golden patterns flow beneath her copper skin and forced himself to imagine her reunited with her people, sharing thoughts and memories in ways he could never fully understand. That's where she belonged, he insisted to himself, not in this tiny ship with a human who could barely handle the simplest mental connection. The ache in his chest at that thought was inappropriate, unprofessional. He was nothing more than a temporary guide, helping her transition back to her real life among the stars. Her eyes blazed suddenly, the air between them becoming almost unbearably hot. "Stop it!" she commanded, her mental voice sharp enough to make him flinch.
"Stop playing these games with yourself."
"What games?" he challenged, even as his heart raced.
"You can't wait to find your people again, and that's perfectly normal. It would be selfish of me to hope you might stay longer, to want—"
He cut himself off, but it was too late. Her laughter filled both the air and his mind.
"Humans are so strange,"
she said, her copper skin glowing with amusement.
"How do you live like this, constantly caging your desires?"
The golden patterns beneath her skin swirled with increasing speed.
"Would you like to see how much better honesty feels?"
Before he could respond, the world shifted. They were still at the table, but also somewhere else, a mental space she had created between them, a narrow corridor in an imaginary spaceship where their faces drew close together, their lips nearly touching. He felt her presence in his mind, warm and intoxicating, as she shared not memories, but possibilities. The scenery changed with each moment, their clothes disappearing in every new scene. The imagined sensations were overwhelming, the taste of stardust on her skin, the way her flame-like hair would feel wrapped around his fingers, the heat of her bare skin against his. Liam slammed his mental barriers down hard, his heart thundering in his chest. The abrupt severance of their connection left the air feeling impossibly cold.
"Breaking a mental link like that,"
she said, her voice tight with hurt and something darker,
"is the gravest insult possible in my culture."
The golden patterns beneath her skin moved in agitated swirls.
"Especially when sharing something so intimate."
His eyes were wide as he stared at her angry face. "I'm sorry," he managed, his voice rough. "I wasn't ready for how real it felt, how intense." He swallowed hard. "Will you stay another week before the supply ship arrives? I can sleep in the tent if I offended you too much." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibilities and regret. When she finally spoke, her copper skin had begun to glow again, but with a different quality, something predatory and ancient.
"Forget the tent. Since humans have no use for mental powers,"
she said carefully, deliberately.
"May I have permission to draw from yours?"
Her eyes locked with his, burning like captured stars.
"After all, it's only natural to have certain feelings for one's savior after thousands of years in stone."
Her flame-colored hair moved with new purpose, casting shadows that seemed to caress his skin.
"So, what do you say? If my mental space scares you, why don't we go to your bed and turn those interrupted imaginings into reality?"
Liam sat frozen, his mind struggling to process her words. Had she really said that? His heart hammered against his ribs as he questioned whether he'd somehow misinterpreted, whether this was another cultural misunderstanding. The golden patterns beneath her skin swirled with increasing intensity as she waited, patient yet predatory, the heat from her body making the air ripple between them. What if he was wrong? What if he stood up and she laughed at his presumption? A week of growing closer suddenly felt like both an eternity and not nearly long enough to be sure of anything. But then he caught her eyes, burning like twin stars in the dim cabin light, and saw something there that mirrored his own wanting. The doubts evaporated like morning dew in the desert sun. He rose slowly, deliberately, a smile spreading across his face as he extended his hand. She might be strong enough now to move on her own, but this wasn't about need. It was about choice. As she held his hand and stood, her height allowing her to look down into his eyes, the air between them grew thick with heat and possibility.
"Isn't it best?"
she whispered against his ear, her breath sending shivers down his spine.
"When we're honest with ourselves."
The morning sunlight caught Izara's hair like captured flame as she stood in the ship's small cockpit, casting warm ribbons of light across the control panels. Another week had passed since their first night together,
and Liam still found himself mesmerized by the way the golden patterns beneath her copper skin seemed to change whenever she moved. Their shared life had fallen into comfortable rhythms. Her warmth had become as natural as breathing. Her presence in his mind felt as familiar as his own thoughts. Liam checked his supplies again, a habit born from years of solitary expeditions. He had requested the supply ship weeks ago, long before finding Izara, knowing his resources would run low after 3 months of excavation. Now, those supplies would serve a different purpose, fueling their journey to search for her people's meeting points. The irony wasn't lost on him. What was meant to be a simple resupply mission would become either their gateway to the stars or their first real obstacle.
The other of your species are entering the atmosphere,
Izara noted, watching the approaching vessel through the view screen.
Time to meet them.
Her flame-colored hair moved in unseen currents as she turned to him, deep crimson roots brightening to almost brilliant amber at the tips. They made their way down the ship's ramp onto the hard-packed earth of the landing zone, half a mile from the ruins where they'd first met. Liam had chosen this spot carefully, open enough for both ships to land safely, but far enough from his research site to avoid any damage from the supply ship's engines. The larger vessel descended in a cloud of dust and engine exhaust, settling onto the ground with a deep mechanical groan. As the dust cleared, Liam felt Izara's mental touch, tinged with an edge of concern that made the air temperature fluctuate subtly around them. Captain Jack emerged first, his professional demeanor shattering the instant he caught sight of Izara. He froze mid-step on his own ship's ramp, jaw dropping as he took in her clearly alien appearance. The copper skin with its flowing golden patterns, the flame-like hair moving in non-existent wind, the elongated ears and inhuman grace of her movements.
Liam?
Jack's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon.
What? Who is that?
The rest of his crew emerged behind him, their reactions ranging from awe to terror. One of them actually stumbled backward into the ship's doorway.
This is Izara,
Liam said calmly, though he could feel his heart racing.
I found her in the ruins. Or rather, I freed her.
Found her?
Jack's voice cracked.
She's not human. Are you insane? Have you any idea how many protocols you've broken? We need to contact headquarters immediately. Get a diplomatic team out here.
I wouldn't recommend that,
Izara interrupted, her tone gentle but carrying an ancient weight that made everyone present shiver, despite the heat radiating from her skin.
Liam and I have other plans.
The temperature around them rose noticeably as she stepped forward, and Jack took an involuntary step back.
What are you?
He demanded, his hand now resting openly on his weapon.
I am a traveler, trapped here for millennia by a species who feared what they didn't understand.
Her eyes began to glow like burning coals.
Liam freed me and earned both my trust and...
She glanced at Liam with a warmth that made the air glow.
More.
More?
Jack's face twisted with a mix of disgust and, perhaps, envy.
Liam, she's obviously controlling you somehow. This is a first contact situation. We need to quarantine the area, run tests.
We're not staying,
Liam cut in, trying to keep his voice steady. The supply run had been scheduled long before he'd found Izara, but now these supplies would fuel their escape rather than his return trip.
Once we've loaded the supplies I ordered, we're leaving. Together.
Leaving?
Jack's professional mask cracked completely.
You can't leave! Do you have any idea what this means? Her knowledge, her technology, this could advance humanity by centuries. We need to study her, learn everything she knows about...
I will share what I choose to share,
Izara said, her hair moving like a living flame as her patience visibly thinned.
I'll write a detailed report of everything I remember about the civilizations and worlds I've encountered. But I am not a specimen to be studied, Captain. I am a free being who has chosen my own path.
The air around her rippled with visible heat distortion.
Jack's crew continued backing away, but their captain seemed caught between fear and opportunity, his face twisting with conflicting emotions.
"This isn't a request,"
Izara continued, her copper skin beginning to glow with inner fire.
"Either accept the knowledge I'm willing to share and provide the supplies Liam has already paid for, or—"
The temperature spiked so high that Jack stumbled back, sweat instantly beading on his forehead.
"or discover firsthand why an entire civilization thought it necessary to trap me in stone."
The moment stretched like molten glass, heavy with possibility and threat. Then, Jack's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him as quickly as it had come. "Fine," he spat, holstering his weapon with shaking hands. "Take your supplies, but don't come crying to us when she gets bored and moves on to her next alien toy." Liam felt Izara's mental laughter, warm and intimate against his thoughts.
"If he only knew,"
her voice whispered in his mind. The tension broken, they began the practical business of transferring supplies between ships. Through it all, Liam marveled at how natural it felt. This partnership with a being that somehow was like living flame, this sharing of mind and purpose. Every brush of her thoughts against his consciousness reminded him that she was not the type who needed to be protected. The loading process took hours, each crate and container carefully secured in Liam's small ship under Izara's watchful gaze. Her presence kept Captain Jack's crew working diligently. None of them wanted to risk angering her. The air around her continued to glow with residual heat from her previous outburst, her flame-colored hair moving in currents as a warning in case they had more absurd demands.
"Your mind feels different,"
Izara observed as they worked together to secure the last of the supplies. Her copper skin caught the fading sunlight, golden patterns flowing beneath its surface like liquid metal.
"More open than before."
Liam smiled, passing her a final container of preserved food.
"I'm becoming used to your presence,"
he admitted. The mental connection between them had grown stronger with each passing day, her warmth in his mind now as familiar as his own thoughts.
"Oh, I still can't quite believe we're really abandoning everything to search for your species."
She set the container down with a grace that belied her strength, her elongated ears twitching slightly as she caught an unspoken thought.
"Having doubts?"
The temperature around them dropped slightly, betraying her concern. "No," he said quickly, reaching out to touch her arm. Her skin burned like a gentle fever under his fingers.
"Just amazed. A month ago I was alone here, cataloging artifacts. Now I'm about to search the stars with a being of living flame."
Her laughter sent waves of warmth through the ship's cargo hold.
"And I was trapped in stone, waking every 100 years, dreaming of stars I thought I'd never see again."
She turned to face him fully, her eyes glowing like twin embers.
"Sometimes the universe has plans we can't imagine."
Outside, Captain Jack's ship was preparing for departure. The crew moved together, pointedly avoiding looking in their direction. Only Jack himself stood watching, his expression a complex mixture of anger, envy, and resigned acceptance. Izara noticed Liam's attention drift toward the other ship.
"He's still thinking about trying something,"
she said softly, the golden patterns beneath her skin flowing faster with agitation.
"But he won't."
Her eyes flashed like solar flares as she sent a precise mental projection to Jack, a vivid image of himself engulfed in starfire, flesh melting away under imaginary heat that could rival a sun's core. Through their link, Liam caught an echo of the vision and shuddered.
"The memory of my power will keep him honest. For now."
Outside, Jack suddenly staggered backward, his face draining of color. His crew turned to him in confusion as he grabbed the side of his ship for support, sweat pouring down his face despite the cool evening air. They rushed to help, asking what was wrong, but Jack just shook his head, his eyes wide with terror as he stared at Izara. She met his gaze calmly, the golden patterns beneath her skin drawing lazy spirals of satisfaction. His crew exchanged bewildered looks, unaware of the mental assault their captain had just endured. But Jack's hands trembled as he waved off their concern and quickly retreated into his ship. "The report you promised them," Liam began, but she silenced him with a gentle mental touch that felt like sunlight on his thoughts.
"Is already written,"
she said, gesturing to a data crystal on the nearby console.
10,000 years of observations, carefully edited to exclude anything personal."
Her lips curved in a smile that made the air around them dance with heat.
"They'll be so busy studying it, they won't have time to chase us."
They made their way to the cockpit, settling into the familiar routine they'd developed over the past 2 weeks. Liam's hands moved over the controls, while Izara's presence filled the small space with comfortable warmth.
"The first meeting point is several parsecs away,"
she said excitedly, her glow brightening as she pulled up the coordinates they'd discussed. The golden traces beneath her skin drew complex patterns of anticipation and hope. "Then that's where we're headed," Liam replied, their hands meeting on the control panel. Through their mental link, he felt her joy and excitement mix with his own, creating a song of shared emotion that made his heart race. The ship's engines came to life, lifting them gently from the planet's surface. Below, the ruins where they'd first met grew smaller, the ancient stones that had been her prison for millennia reduced to tiny squares in the growing dusk. Captain Jack's vessel was already ascending, a dark shape against the violet sky. As they broke the atmosphere, Izara's hair moved like living flame in the zero gravity, each strand catching and refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. She turned to Liam, her copper skin glowing with an inner light that outshone the distant stars.
"No regrets?"
she asked softly, though her presence in his mind meant she already knew the answer. "None," he replied, both aloud and through their mental link. Her warmth flooded his consciousness, carrying with it images of worlds he'd never seen, adventures yet to come, and affection that burned as bright and eternal as the stars themselves. The ruins of her ancient prison faded behind them as they set course for the first meeting point. Whether they would find her people there or not seemed less important now. They had found each other, and that was enough. The universe stretched out before them, vast and mysterious, waiting to be explored by the unlikely pair. A solitary human archaeologist, and the being of living flame he had freed from stone. In the depths of space, where no one could hear them, Izara's laughter echoed through their shared mental space like a song of freedom. They had left behind ruins and imprisonment, choosing instead the boundless stars ahead. Together, as friends, as something more, as explorers of the unknown.